Hi, welcome to the Watercolour Westport Stories podcast. We're so happy to have you with us today, and you are going to meet one of our ambassador homeowners, John. He has been living in watercolor for a number of years now, and he has a wonderful story to share with you and inspiration that you might find a sense of community and belonging here in watercolor for yourself. We look forward to having him with us, and you will be joined with Stephen Rolston, founder and owner of Land Ark Homes and the visionary behind Watercolour Westport.
Welcome everybody. My name's Steve Rolston, and I'm here today with the Watercolour Westport Stories. And today we have the privilege of interviewing my friend John Bumas. So John, welcome to our podcast. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
Yes. And so we're getting a little more formal as we evolve so that we can send out our friends who we interview, residents mostly in the community, these 6 simple questions. And we're just going to spend more or less what will feel like about 5 minutes on each one. And I know if your wife Joan were here, it would be a lot more informal. But I'll just ask you these and we'll just go through them one by one. Tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, your background, family, interests, and hobbies. So take it away, John.
So after 40 years of working, 40 plus years, I retired, and those were all good years, and I love working, and I continue to work in my retirement. So my wife and I, we are celebrating our 50th anniversary this year in August, and we will be getting together with our kids and grandkids. We have 3 children and 2 daughter-in-laws and 1 son-in-law and 10 grandkids. And so all 18 of us will be here in Westport in August and having a 50th celebration. So that's a little something about myself. I think that more will come as we go further into the questions.
And we'll come back to them too, because
right.
There's a number that, as Wafa was reminding me, that because I've gotten to know people and their interests, we'll touch on a few of these and then we'll come back to hobbies.
Hobbies and interests. So from an interest point of view, I've always had an interest in governance, and that's more in line with the not-for-profit organizations or charitable organizations that exist around the province, but also in regard to the private world. Governance, good governance makes for great organizations, and the opposite is also true. And so that's been an interest of mine for a long time. If I'm not doing that, I might be doing deep dives into theology, or I enjoy sitting on the periphery of the political world and watching as that unfolds, and again I get back to good governance and measuring my sense of that against our political climate and the governing bodies that run the country, the province, or North America, and so on. So those are some. The healthcare system has always been near and dear to me because I was employed in it, and so I continue to sort of watch and see as we make efforts at making the healthcare system perhaps more efficient and effective, and fixing those broken parts that everybody's well aware of. So those are some of the things that my interests lie in. Hobbies, gardening has always been a part of me. Hiking, fishing, being outdoors, refinishing antique furniture, many hobbies, many interests, and And those continue today. Now I am able to follow my interests without having a sense of responsibility for it, because I'm not working within it. And also my hobbies, I have my leisure time now that I can do it as I please. So, yeah.
Well, why don't we just segue right there, because the whole idea here is connecting people and building community for our watercolor residents, so that as long as we're attempting to help, connect neighbor to nature, to me, I think it's incredible what you've done right next door to where you live. And then we'll touch on another place that your handiwork has been found. So can you share a little bit about what you've done right next door to your home?
Yeah, so when we moved to Westport, Watercolour, we chose a lot that was beside an old cemetery, and this cemetery, there are stones in there that date back to the early 1800s, and it was somewhat overgrown, and beside us, because the one side of our house, our lot bordered the cemetery, I decided that we needed to clean it up, and so went in there and took out old wild grapevines and brambles and bushes and stuff, and had a lot of help from friends, from Watercolour, just in removing the stuff that I had hacked away at or taken down or whatever. And today, after 3 bouts of poison ivy in the cemetery, we've been successful, and it's cleaned up, and it's just one of the things. It's fun to restore something, to try to make it how it was meant to be, and I think it's just maybe a little respectful of the place and giving it what it needed to be, a place that people can come to and reflect or just sit and contemplate or visit old friends who some people do that. They go to the cemetery and it gives them a place of meditation or whatever. So it's a nice place, and it's interesting to hear the community's response. They've noticed, and so that's nice. That's my reward.
And my wife and I have hiked. She's hiked all of the Rideau Trail, whereas I've only done some of the sections where we'll park one car and hike 10 or 15 or maybe 20 kilometers. But one of the places we did that was through Kingston, and I couldn't believe seeing the beauty and the awe and the wonder in a cemetery, because I believe Sir John A. Macdonald, or one of our founding fathers of Confederation, is buried there. And
Okay.
it's remarkable to hike the Rideau Trail, and then you come out in the middle of this beautiful garden, and that's what I think of when I think of what you've done. Is it's a park-like setting now, and before it was just overgrown, and you could only enter into maybe a third of it or a quarter of it, but now it is that park-like setting.
So yeah, and it's not that I did it by myself, and my good friend Rodney, who is an employee of Land Ark Homes, he was always there, ready and willing to remove the piles of debris and give a hand, lend a little equipment when I needed it to take out some of the bigger stuff, and so it was a combination, a joint kind of effort. There was another fellow in town, and he would come sometimes with his tractor and move stuff over and get it ready for takeaway by Land Ark Homes, and it's a nice feeling to be able to do something and have sort of partners who are quite willing just to free up their time and and give a hand when they're called on. So, you know, you can't have a better project. You can't have a better team. You can't. It just came together really well.
Well, can you share with residents and people considering maybe making watercolor the right next step, also what you've done with the trail network?
Well, the trail is an interesting story because when I arrived here in Watercolour, one of the things I noticed was I call them wild grapevines, and they were growing up into the trees, and in the summertime it was the grapevine that would form the canopy over top of the trees. These trees were tall and mature, and the grapevines, the stalk maybe 2 inches in diameter or 3, and I knew a little bit about grapevines choking trees out, and they're an invasive species, not native, and so I made it my business to go and pull these grapevines out of the trees and chop them up and expose the true canopy and prevent further decay of the trees that were living and still holding on to these things. And so now we see the trees instead of the grapevines, and in the course of doing that, some of those vines are pretty stubborn and you could pull on them and they wouldn't let go, and you can imagine they're up 30 feet or something and not letting go. So one weekend I had my son Mark down, and he's a good size, and I said, Mark, you need to help me pull a couple of these vines down. So I was at the bottom end of the vine pulling, and he had his hands above me on the vine. We're both pulling very hard, and all of a sudden the vine let go up top of the tree, and we went flying. And the net result was I ended up with what they called a Maisonneuve fracture, where you fracture your ankle and your tibia up above. And off I went to the Perth hospital. I walked my way out of the trail. I guess the fracture wasn't that bad, but I could only get that far, and then went off to Perth hospital, got some excellent care, fantastic care. And that was my story on the trail. And since that time, I've pulled more vines out and cut them out, or just cut them at the bottom. But I've learned not to pull too hard because you might go flying. So yeah, I think the trail is coming along nicely in terms of the vine, and it's just nice to see it cleaned up some, and there's more I probably would do, and it just I do it when I feel like it. It's nice being in the bush. It's nice being in nature. I can come and go as I please. I get a little hand with assistance when I need a special tool, and apart from that, it's just another thing for me to do and enjoy.
Well, the neighborhood really appreciates it, and a lot of longtime residents have said they love the people, they love the homes, and they love the trails. And my sons laid them out, and our land planner showed us the land in the first place, and then he showed us the creeks or the seasonal water courses. But yeah, what you've done has really enhanced so much the incredible nature of this idea of connecting people to nature and neighbor. And it's a testament to, 3 times poison ivy, let alone a broken leg, all for the public good and serving others. So thank you for that.
Well, you're welcome. I do have to say I've enjoyed every minute of it. It's not like, oh no, work. It's just a pleasure for me to do. Restoring something to more like what it was meant to be is just very fulfilling. I think most people would find that.
Yeah. So can you share with people what you used to do in the marketplace specifically as regards to the healthcare system? Just
Okay.
for a little bit.
So for the last 25 years of my working life, I worked in long-term care. I worked for a charitable organization in the Niagara Peninsula that did long-term care and affordable housing on site. It was considered one of the larger campuses, if you will, in Ontario, seniors campuses, and enjoyed every minute of that. That work it's just one of those places where I gave my all to the employer and did the best job I could. I felt rewarded by it all, and when I finished working and retired, I retired from that place, Albright Centre, Niagara Peninsula. I left my briefcase behind. I left the appointment book behind. I left my suit and tie behind, and I have truly sort of cut off from that world, even though I enjoyed every minute of working there. And I guess, like the challenges of working with our provincial government and the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care and Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation and so on, there was never a dull moment, and we were able to make a difference, I think, in long-term care, in the rebuild of our long-term care home, and in new design, and more respecting more the privacy and of the people who are going to live there, and their dignity, just by way of how you design something. So that would be my, apart from that, volunteering while I was doing that work in both my church community and in the with our provincial association for the long-term care homes and other boards and things. That's all sort of now behind me, and I guess I am now in a place where I can give freely of whatever it is that people think I can contribute to, and I'm happy to do that, and without having the actual responsibility for it. So good place, and that was my last 25 years of work. I've probably worked for 40-something years and in many other places, but that was probably the longest term working for somebody.
And so share with people where you're coming from. You mentioned working in the Niagara Peninsula, but where is it that you lived before?
So I've lived all over, really, southwestern Ontario, from, I'm going to say, the western edge of Toronto through to Chatham and in between. And I ended up living in Grimsby, Ontario, which is right between Hamilton and St. Catharines. Grimsby is a wonderful little community. I think when we moved there was about maybe a population of 24,000. And the fruit orchards were still sort of there. The vineyards were taking over. And over the course of 25 years, I think the Greater Toronto area came around the Burlington Bay and on towards St. Catharines. And so there was a noticeable increase in population and housing and all things that come, cars and highways and highway widenings and improvements and all things that come with a higher density of people living in a small, let's say, geography. So we were, in living in Grimsby, we were able to sort of see the infill, if that's a good word, of land and of shoreline along Lake Ontario. And it was, it got to be a little bit much. When you, in my opinion, when you create high-rises along the QEW, along the shoreline of Lake Ontario, when you no longer see Lake Ontario, it seems to be a shame. It seems that the lakeside should have been a recreational, walkway, pathway, bicycles, skateboarders, doesn't matter, just to get out in a way, a place to, but it truly is filling up, and the GO train has come around from Toronto and Hamilton and now headed to St. Catharines, and those are good things for people who have to live and work in those places, and helps them to maybe take cars off the road if you're taking the GO train, but it's become a very busy and hurried lifestyle, and many people on the go, and maybe a loss of a sense of community, and more drifting towards being an individual living in a place where you might say hi to a neighbor, but you really don't have that connectivity with people that you had before. I don't know how to explain that very well, but I think I've always enjoyed visiting Toronto, and I've always enjoyed knowing that after my visit I get to go home to Grimsby. Grimsby has the escarpment in its backyard, and the Bruce Trail is there, and so we could walk, and it was our regular activity for us to be on the Bruce Trail, just to be away from the hustle and bustle of city life.
Well, now maybe we can transition to, when did you find out about watercolor?
So Joan and I, in Joan's family, there was a cottage on O'Brien's Lake, which is right between Westport and Perth. And this cottage became our second home for 50 years. Our children grew up in that cottage. There was no other place to go in our summer vacations than the cottage. If we could squeeze in a few weekends, we would do that. It was a significant drive from Grimsby, maybe 4.5 hours. But very worthwhile as far as Joan and I and the 3 kids were concerned. That cottage, as we grew up and our children married, and Joan's sister's children married or had kids, and etc., it became a bit of a scheduling problem, and who does what, when, why, where, and we gave the cottage up. That was hard on, I think, all the families, and our children in particular. And so Joan and I, particularly Joan, she had a sense that she wanted to buy another cottage, but just own it, rather than having multiple ownership in the family. We would own it ourselves. And so that was a conversation that would come up periodically, and I was at a point where I said, I really don't want to be down here and have a cottage up there and own the 2 properties and look after the 2 properties and do all the things you need to do. And that was our conversation. And so it didn't go anywhere. It was never a no and never a yes. And we did look at a few places in and around Westport, Perth area. And then one day we happened to be at the cottage, which was now owned by Joan's cousin, and we were renting it. And I drove into Westport, and lo and behold, there was this little residential subdivision development that was happening. And I'm a curious sort of person, and I've always followed real estate for whatever reason. Just look at listings and what they're going for and all this sort of stuff. And I thought, well, I was on my way to the grocery store or something in Westport, and I just said, I have to stop in. So I went into the model home, and I think there was 3 or 4 other spec homes. There might have been more, I don't know. I went into the model home, and I met 2 representatives from Land Ark Homes. And chatting with them, I discovered they were graduates of Redeemer University in Ancaster, Hamilton area. And I had been on the board of Redeemer University for a time, and I just could not believe that I would meet 2 graduates from that university here in Westport. And so we got chatting, and one thing led to another, and then I said, well, while I'm here, I might as well tour around the model home. And then they took me to the spec homes, and we talked about net zero ready homes I knew nothing about. And I was just enamored with the whole thing, delighted by the fact that I had this connection with these 2 people, and so I went back to the cottage, said to Joan, well, Joan, you have to come and look at this place. And Joan said, I'm not going. She loves the cottage. I'm not leaving here unless I have to go into town. Well, we'll do it when we have to go into town. So, of course, next grocery trip or whatever it was, into town we go, and Joan and I, we come into the model home, and now we meet one of the reps that I had met earlier, but we also meet Stephen Rolston, Kevin Rankin, and I don't know if there was anybody else there, but Stephen, in his way, he said, come in, sit down, want to have a conversation, let's talk. And so Stephen is explaining net zero ready homes. He's explaining his vision for this community called Watercolour within Westport, and his vision for the village. And I'm watching my wife. She's levitating off the couch, and I'm thinking, oh no, what have I done? And Joan is basically, after about an hour of talking, saying where are the papers we're going to sign. And that really what was happening was the light bulb went on for her, perhaps myself, that if we were to buy a home in Watercolour, Westport, we would now be buying a cottage and a home all in one. And the interesting part of this was we left there, and I was resistant. Joan was ready to sign. I said, having looked at the site plan, well, if I was going to buy here, I would want that lot beside the cemetery. And I said to Joan at the time, and one of the things I will do is be out there in the cemetery cleaning it up. And Joan said, whatever you want. she was ready, and I said, and the siding would have to be that color, and whatever you want, whatever you want. anyway, Stephen Ralston was kind enough to let me stew on this for 2 months, and I think he held that lot knowing that I was coming. Somehow he had the idea in his head, so he held it. And finally one day, I think it was 2 months later, I got a call and saying, well, John and Joan, you really do need to make up your mind. We have other people and they kind of like the lot and so on. And that was it. So then our journey started. And of course, having been somebody who's always loved nature and the hiking and the fishing and coming here, you're on the Canadian Shield, you're in the heart of a UNESCO heritage designated Rideau Canal system. You walk out your door and you're immediately in nature. Like that was a bit of a dream come true, because the reality is that while I've enjoyed living in southwestern Ontario and I lived there because that's where my job was. I enjoyed providing for my family, so you work to do that, and you make the best of your time. And your leisure time is not as big, but when you do have leisure time, we always found ourselves getting out of the city and into nature. So coming here was like having your cake and eating it too. And even today, you know, you talked about trails, and there's 4 of us guys, and we're all probably around my age. We've discovered Frontenac Park, and every Monday off we go to Frontenac Park, backpacks, lunches, hot chocolate, middle of the winter, coldest days, and we hike. And Frontenac Park is really I would characterize it as a wilderness park. It's sort of like Algonquin, although much smaller in size. And we're up to 18.7 kilometers in a day, which I consider pretty good for a bunch of old guys. And so you know, we can walk out our front door and walk 5 minutes down the road to Sand Lake, to the beach, and go swimming. Ice fishing is something I might be taking up pretty soon. It just intrigues me, the whole thing. So I've been on sites looking at what basic equipment one needs to go ice fishing and so on. And it's just the waterway itself. You're able to rent a pontoon boat if you don't own one, and you can do the canals and go down to Chaffee's Locks and have ice cream, and you can park in the middle of the upper Rideau, go swimming, and it's just all sort of sitting there for you. And so here we are. Yeah.
And one of the things that I remember asking you, what was holding you back from making a decision? And I remember your response, something along the lines of, well, how am I going to meet people? How am I going to make friends? Because that's everyone's number one response is, how am I going to make friends? How am I going to meet people? So could you share a little bit about how you found meeting people and making new friends?
Okay, so I think that was part of it. My resistance was you're always secure with what you know. And even though I've been coming here for 50 years for vacation, I didn't know anybody in Westport. It was just a place to go and get your groceries, to the post office, get some Wi-Fi because you didn't have it at the cottage, or whatever, right? You went into town, you went back out. Having said that, we always made it a bit of a visit because it's a pretty little town, and the harbor is really neat. We'd go over there with our ice cream cones and all that stuff. But I didn't know anybody really in Westport. And So there you are, and you're thinking about your friends in Grimsby, your acquaintances in Grimsby. You're thinking about the familiarity with your bank and your doctor and your dentist and all the things that are needs in people's lives. And then you're also, I think you come to a point where you say, does that hold you back from doing what you really are passionate about? You're always wanting to get out of Grimsby. You're wanting to go to the local conservation area or be up on the Bruce Trail or go cycling on those old railway beds along the shores of Lake Erie or whatever. You're always heading out, and you're always getting in a car and packing everything up and then driving, and you're on the QEW most times when living there. And now you have an opportunity to walk out your front door and it's all available. You can cross-country ski out your front door, we can. If you want, you can snowshoe, you can ice fish out your front door, you can kayak, you can swim, it's just there, and you don't really have to get into a car. And if you do get into a car, you don't have to go through 20 stoplights to get somewhere. You're really on county roads at very little traffic, and it's an easy drive to Perth or to Kingston if you want, if you need to go for some big city stuff and then be able to get out, you can get your fill because it's all available, readily available, Ottawa. And so thinking about the whole thing, it just kind of said, no, if our friends are truly our friends, they'll come and visit us because we're moving to God's country. That's the way it's going to be. And certainly our friends have come to visit us. We just had friends over for a sleepover on Monday, Tuesday. And if we do need to go back to Grimsby, and we do maybe once every 5-6 weeks, because Joan's mom's still living and she's in assisted living there. We stay at friends' places there, and it's just like nothing's ever changed other than they love to come, and especially in the spring, summer, fall. So really, it was a good decision, I think. And then coming here, you quickly discover that in Watercolour, everybody who's come is also moved from somewhere. Mm-hmm. So in a sense, it makes me think of Newfoundland when they say we're from away. And we're all from away in Watercolour, and whether it's Ottawa or Niagara Peninsula or wherever, Toronto, it doesn't matter. You come and you meet, and you have a common base, which is, what do you do in Westport? Or what about this? And you're living in a very, advanced home in terms of its technologies used, and none of us are used to that. So we ask about net zero, and we ask about our heat pumps and how the furnace works, and the ERV, the air exchange system, and filters, and so we all just help each other, and connections into town. What do you do? Where do you go? What do you see? And it's just been a community builder, because we have a base, a common base, which is you've moved out of what I'm going to call the home in which we raised our children, and out of that community into a brand new community. And that common base is what you can work with. And then once you work with that, the relationships just carry on to other areas of interest. So For example, I know a person in Watercolour, and he's very interested in the whole trails network. The Rideau Trail, which goes from Kingston through to Ottawa, I think, and cuts right in through Westport and the trailhead towards, and even the Canada Trail, he's involved in that. And so a wealth of knowledge and an interest that takes you into his world and the trail world, and you quickly learn about a whole bunch of things that you didn't know about. And somebody else might be into they're foodies, and the next thing you know, you're having dinner, and the conversation evolves. And somebody else might be into the church community and what they're doing within the village. And then and there's so many ways. And so the bottom line is, Joan and I moved into phase 1, and we knew everybody well in phase 1. And we enjoyed it so much that it was sort of natural for us to, when phase 2 was under development, as the people moved in, to say hi and let them know that if they needed an extra hand for something, they could just knock on our door. And Joan would often bring muffins, but there's too many coming too fast now. She says, I can't keep up. But it just has been, and then, so the community itself also being new, Land Ark Homes has, we've had little street parties and events that have brought phase 2 and 1 folks together, and it just creates a sense of community, I suppose, that probably is healthier and more holistic than anything I've experienced before. We've always had some sense of community in places we lived, but it's this village, it includes the village and the Watercolour development. There's something about that whole thing that just makes you feel part of something. That we can walk into town, and people who've lived here for all their lives, you can chat with them and learn some of the history of Westport and where it's at today and how it got there, and you can go into the local museum and which is incredible, really, and our grandchildren love going in there because they can touch everything, and it's not sort of hands off and behind glass doors and all that kind of thing. So you get to know our municipal elected officials quite fast. When you need something like a fire permit, you walk into town hall and you get your fire permit for your backyard, or whatever. All very helpful. You can go pay your taxes. You walk into town hall and just do it there. So, yeah.
Well, thus we'll conclude chapter 1 of Team Buma of John and Joan, because I think that is Joan at the door, and maybe we'll carry on this conversation with her coming up next. But
Right.
Thank you so much, John,
You're
for
welcome.
making time to be here. It's so wonderful to see you.
Thank you for joining us today for the Watercolour Westport Stories podcast. We hope you've been inspired. You can like, follow, share our podcast with others through YouTube and Facebook, and connect with us through our website at watercolorwestport.com.